Coaches, are you ready to revolutionize your game preparation? For the past 5 seasons, coaches across the nation have been using the ultimate scout team game changer, the Coachpad. Imagine this: no more scrambling on weekends to prep scout cards, no more fumbling with paper and binders. Whether you're drawing your cards digitally with a computer program or sketching them by hand, the Coachpad is your all in one solution. Picture yourself on the practice field effortlessly managing your scout team or standing on the sidelines during game day. Syncing adjustments from the press box to your coaches on the sideline and back. With the coach pad, you can clearly see your scout cards even in the brightest sunlight. No more squinting or dealing with the wind blowing clear vinyl sleeves everywhere. This offseason, take your coaching to the next level. Get your coach pad today at thecoachpad.com and gear up for a winning season ahead.
Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Down Backer Podcast. Today we have our good friend, the defense coordinator of our illustrious Final Four team there at Centerville, Coach John Puckett. Coach, how you doing?
Good, Nick, man. How are you doing? Thanks for
Good.
having me on.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. Like I said, we've seen a lot of each other this week, so
Yeah, that's
um,
good.
like obviously, I mean, last year you had a good year, and I know you lost quite a bit of talent from that team, and you guys probably exceeded expectations this year.
Yeah.
Final Four run to Moeller in the Final Four, but I mean, we want to kind of talk about kind of the genesis of this season because again, like we talk every year, and I mean, you all had a pretty dang good season and kind of and seemed to get better as the year kind of went on. How'd that kind of work for you, especially defensively?
Yeah. I mean, we lost. I mean, I knew our box was going to be pretty good because we had everybody coming back there, but we had to replace, 4 out of the 5 guys in the secondary. And so you just, with who we have to play and the kind of guys we have to go against, and our defense is not the easiest thing in the world to pick up. The Just kind of didn't know, and we went to Ohio State for their tournament, their 7-on-7 tournament in June, and got freaking rolled by everybody. Um, and it wasn't close. Like we looked bad doing it, and so it was just one of them deals where, I could see this team being 2-8. And defensively, I could see us, you know, it was kind of it was different because we were even less explosive in terms of athleticism than most years. And so I was trying to figure out, okay, what can these guys do well? What can they not? How are we going to be able to put pressure on a quarterback and those types of things? And then we were kind of got our tails kicked a little bit in the scrimmages. Um, and then we started off the year with Lakota East, who was a very good team. And about 80, probably 85% of that game, we played really, really good, but our 15% was really bad. And then, but we were able we ended up winning that game. And then we played Carmel and St. X in back-to-back weeks. But it was kind of the same thing. Like against Carmel, 90% of the time, like we were really good on defense. But that 10% was atrocious. And it was kind of the same thing against X. And then I don't know, I think we just kind of stuck with it. And we kind of figured out how we can uh, manufacture pressure and still be able to cover on the back end. But we made 2, I think, key like position changes that really, really kind of let us go into take it to the next level. Is that we weren't getting the last couple of years, we have not been getting doubled at our nose. And then we had a guy playing a 3 and sometimes a 5. that was really athletic, but he wasn't always doing what he was supposed to do. And then we had a really good player playing our boundary outside backer that wasn't involved in plays. And then our weak side inside backer. So teams are just running to the field on us and taking advantage of two new guys starting. So then we moved our boundary backer to our field side inside backer and took that D lineman and made him a nose. And I told the D line coaches, I said, whatever you do, don't overcoach him. I just want this kid to wreak havoc. And that's what he did. I mean, he was a monster for teams inside. I mean, he was the biggest kid we had, maybe 6'1", 240, but he was great feet, super quick, powerful. And then the kid that ended up playing that field side inside backer, he was unbelievable all year. I still can't. I don't know who votes for All Ohio, but how that kid didn't make any of the All Ohio teams is amazing to me. He was by far, in my opinion, the best inside backer in our league. I thought he should have gotten Defensive Player of the Year. How the hell that kid from Springboro got Defensive Player of the Year is mind-numbing to me, especially over our guy and the kid from Springfield. But he was a difference maker because he's a good blitzer. He was really good in pass coverage. So once that happened, also too, like when you get like this group really, really liked each other. And so like they celebrated each other. I mean, it was just, they were a lot of fun to coach just because of that. Like they had great attitudes. They were tougher than hell. And then we had a really good stretch of about 11 games, I think, where I think from like the second half of the Fairmont game, which was week 4, all the way up to week 14. So I guess that's 10 games. They had only given up 77 points in that stretch. And they were really good. So it was a lot of fun.
Good. That seems to be a common thing when you hear like really, really like state semifinal teams or like final teams. You mentioned there about like that group really likes each other. That seems to be a common denominator, especially when you have some talent and various other things that usually takes it to that next step. It seems to be for whatever reason. So.
Yeah, I mean, when you got a guy that you respect and that you like, and when he holds you accountable, it's a lot easier for you to receive it, right? As opposed to if you don't like a guy or you don't really care for him or whatever, and that guy's trying to hold you accountable for what you're doing. Sometimes you can ignore it, or maybe they end up getting into an argument or whatever. Like there was, I mean, I think out of our 5 captains, 4 of them were defensive guys, and it was just a great group to be around. And they held each other accountable. They held me accountable. I mean, they trusted each other. They trusted me. So it was fun. Like it was, I mean, they weren't the most naturally talented kids, but I mean, it's not like they were scrubs either. I mean, they were still pretty good athletically, but they just weren't great. But they were all really good football players. Like they were smart, tough, and they played hard. I mean, our guys played hard. And that's usually what happens when guys like each other. They end up playing just a little bit harder than guys that don't like each other.
Now with that, you said you had to manufacture pressure, and me and you've had talks about blitz calls and schemes before. How much did you have to add to that or dig into your bag of tricks for that? Because again, when you, like you said, little talent deficiencies in terms of just overall talent. Plus, again, your events at Ohio State to make your coverage back end work. How much did you have to dig into there and modify and make sure you were good as the season kind of went on?
Well, I think so. We spent a lot of time really on blitz technique um, to be as efficient as we could with it. We ended up being a lot less of edge pressures and a lot more just kind of up the shoot, and but also by manufacture, like so we did a lot of different fronts than we normally had been doing, just to try to create some confusion, or once we figured out you know whatever front we were giving you, if you were going to get us big on big, then we were able to attack that a certain way. And so it ended up being, and then we changed the coverage technique a little bit, where we're trying to match routes a little bit earlier to get him to hold it just a hair longer. um and but also too, I think with having that nose inside and kind of cutting him loose a little bit and not limiting him with rules and what have you, um, you know, getting that pressure right in his face right away ended up helping us out a ton. Um, so most of our pressures were in A and B gaps this year, and a lot of crossing, a lot of twisting, that, and then playing off in our man stuff and kind of playing some catch technique stuff at the sticks really helped in terms of getting him to hold it just a hair longer to get us there. We did some more um, like running a 4-man pressure, but it looks like a 6-man pressure, and dropping the ends out and playing like a Tampa 2 behind it. We did that quite a bit. Um, we also brought 6 and 7 a little bit more than I have in the past, just to try to get the quarterback to panic a little bit. Um, so when I say like that, like we ended up, like it wasn't nothing for us this year to go into a game with, I don't know, 10 or 11 fronts. And then I think being patient enough to call them and show them all those fronts early to get them thinking about it, and then working our blitz pass off of that.
Yeah. I was curious because again, I've heard talking to some people, and GWalk, you were a little more aggressive this year, so that kind of makes sense on why. Now going back to the Ohio State thing, where you guys did struggle, and kind of knowing that your first two, really your first three opponents were as difficult as they were going to be. When did you and how did you go through I mean, obviously you made some of the personnel changes, but in terms of what coverages and I mean, obviously I know you well enough that you installed everything still, but at what point did certain other things like your Tampa 2 and some of the other stuff become the primary instead of saying your cover one or your ripple is match stuff? I mean, at what point did you start making those decisions or adjustments? Was it right after Ohio State? Was it okay? Let's see how the summer goes a little bit more, and then okay, after around the Saint X Carmel time, okay, what was that kind of process like? Okay, we have the skeleton, the bare bones of everything. This is now what we're going to focus on because obviously we have deficiencies here.
The I would say probably around after the first scrimmage, we kind of started focusing a little bit more on our too high stuff, just because it was a little bit. We had a new corner that came in from a new school who was extremely talented, and but he came from Dunbar, and so you get dropped in to our defense after primarily playing like just some old school quarter stuff and man stuff. It can be, you know, overwhelming. And then our too high stuff is a little bit is a lot easier to teach to the corners because they're primarily man, we didn't do as much. Kind of got away from rip liz in large part for basically for two reasons. One, um, the corners were struggling a little bit picking up some of this, being able to see some of the pushes and checks and stuff like that. But also too, like we didn't see a ton of 2x2. So when you get with with some of the rip liz stuff, there's so much 3x1 that you end up playing a lot of zone coverage stuff more than any kind of like match coverage stuff. So we sprinkled it in. I think we only had like 36 snaps where we actually played rip liz and it stuck. And so that was another reason why we didn't do a ton of that and played a lot more of our two high stuff. And then we played quite a bit of the Saban guys. They call it Big 12, where they're bringing five from the weak side, but they're still playing their quarters man match stuff to the field, and they're just zeroed out on the backside. We did quite a bit of that this year. We had some pretty cool little wrinkles to help us on some stuff. So yeah, I mean, that's what's I'm talking about manufacturing. So we're still matching it to the field, but we're bringing pressure, we're still bringing five. So we're not just having to play man all the time. But the Tampa stuff was a good way to alleviate some pressure on the safeties and getting that getting that three runner down the middle because we saw so much trips. And I thought it was it was a really good answer or a really good variation off of our regular one high stuff. Like the stubby stump stuff is not bad, but it's also, I don't think it's great against unless you have athletic guys. But the Tampa stuff it's easy once they kind of picked it up, it became a lot easier for them.
Was that a lot of the Tampa stuff that we talked about last year when you talked to what's his name from the NFL?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dean Pease.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Like, see, foreshadowing, John, foreshadowing. You just foreshadowed it all into existence. See, but yeah, no, okay. So that makes a lot more sense, especially when I talk to people and like I said, find out a couple things. I still pay attention even though I'm not in the area as much as I need to be. You've how do I want to word this? I mean, you've evolved. Actually, let's look at it this way. How, from a defensive perspective, what trends are you seeing? Like I said, I'm just curious about that. Like for offenses that you watch, like what trends are you seeing, and kind of how are you adapting it? Because you mentioned there you're not seeing a lot of 2x2 anymore. When let's be honest, a couple of years ago, 2x2 or 2x1 with a sniffer was virtually all you're seeing.
Yeah.
You go back 15, 20 years, you're seeing double tights, eye. So what trends are you currently seeing, and how are you kind of or looking to adapt to some of those things?
Well, we're seeing a lot more on like tackle over formations. This year we saw actually quite a bit of motion. Like we saw a lot of teams start off in 2x2, but a lot more motion than we have seen in the past. And then a lot of max protection. The thing that's been, I think, that we see a ton of is that like teams aren't really kind of attacking us or throwing the ball in the middle of the field. So unless it's a post shot, like we're not seeing a ton of mesh or digs or things of that nature. We don't see boot very often anymore. So I see everything seems to be to really get the ball out fast, or they're going to max protect and take a shot. That seems, maybe that's just against us, but it seems like that's what kind of everybody's kind of going towards. And like I said, a lot of tackle over or unbalanced sets.
Now, do you think that's because of all the odd fronts that like most high schools have started transitioning to, with being a three man, all a lot of 3-3 stack stuff, a lot of middle of the field closed? Is that why? Or because like again, same thing kind of out here. Like, didn't see much dig concepts, boot concepts. A lot of what pass game we saw were outside, kind of like you mentioned, max protect stuff. Even when I watched film of other people this year, like it's 7-8 man protections and then 2 or 3 guys out on a route.
Yeah.
Would it be because of defenses, or do you think that just because that's the fad, quote unquote?
Well, um, I don't know. I think we see a little bit more max protect stuff because they know that like we're coming. So, um, and like the other thing too, like why we probably see max protection with shots is like, when we're blitzing, we don't even have a middle of the field player. So, 90% of the time. So I think it's more, and it could be just a fad that they don't, there really wasn't a real dominant offensive lineman this year. Um, Probably maybe a lack of depth at quarterback to try to keep him as healthy as they can. Um, and I think you have to protect a little bit longer on throws that are that far. If you're trying to space out 53 and a third, maybe you got to max protect a little bit longer. Yeah, I mean, I don't, hell, man, I don't know. I don't know why offensive guys do what they do. They probably, you know, they run a play and it works, and then they don't run it again. So how much sense does that make?
I wonder who you're talking about there. Say so many things, but I'll flip that on that because you are a creature of habit, and what I mean by that is you spend all off season every year studying, and you usually pick on certain things. Like obviously, we talked about you talking to Peas, and I know you like to talk to certain people, especially when you don't play them anymore. Even though you saw them get in the playoffs this year. Um, like trend wise for you, what are you seeing defensively, or what have you been studying? Or what are you looking to study this offseason? Obviously, there's some things in flux with Centerville's head coaching job being open. But kind of, I mean, you have that habit every year, and it might not be football because me and you do also have a lot of conversations about leadership development as well. Um, like I said, I think a third of my culture books are because of you. But kind of what are you looking at, either defensively, trend wise, culturally? Like, where are you looking this off season as you kind of look to develop?
I think again, like trying to um, maybe making it a little bit being able to ID protections a little bit faster, and like, okay, if we're getting half slide, you know, how are we, more or better blitz paths to attack it? I think that's been kind of my primary focus the last couple of years is, how to attack protections. And then trying to find subtle little tweaks on how to coach certain things. Maybe whether it's, like the Tampa 2 stuff, like, whether we want to run it in inverted cover 2 or run it out of, or more of a traditional way. But just finding little ways to like that. That's not a big, like wholesale change for our guys, but yet it gives us another little variation of something that can confuse a 17-year-old kid. Um, I think been kind of stuck the last couple of years that we haven't really we our pressures haven't evolved. So finding different pressures at a different fronts, I think, is going to be a big emphasis this off season. Like last year was primarily all focused from a coverage standpoint because I knew we were going to be a little bit weaker on the back end. So how can we? That's why we went got a lot of stuff on the Tampa stuff, and then um, a goal line coverage that we ran quite a bit that was really efficient for us, where it looks like we're playing man, and we kind of are, but we saw a lot of crossing routes and a lot of in corner and those types of things. Just better ways to defend that outside of telling a guy that he needs to compete harder, like, um, and so we got a new like red zone coverage that ended up being actually really good for us. And teams struggled with it when we got down there, and it really helped us. And we had installed that in the summer. We ran that week 1 against East and a couple times, and it was really beneficial for us. And it's the thing about it is being able to add to our playbook without adding a lot of different techniques. Like that coverage is something completely different that we run. However, it's the same technique for the corner as if he's playing an outside third. It's the same technique for everybody else that we would play in our 2 trap coverage. So we're not learning anything new, but it looks completely different than anything else that we do.
Okay. I think I know what you're talking about. I'll ask you off screen about that one. I think I know where you went with that, but we'll come back to the red zone coverage because I think I know.
But you can ask me now. I don't care.
Is it? I'm trying to remember what the name of it is. A lot of like NFL teams use it. Is
Yeah,
it?
we call it Rambo.
Yeah, it's like if one goes in, like I'd have to look at my notes. Like if one does this, you bail. Otherwise, you have like it's a lot of if then, right? Essentially.
Well, yeah, the way we play it is like if 2 is in the flat right away, the corner's going to trap it.
Yeah.
And then, so the corners they're trapping the slot, or if the slot isn't out, then they're dropping and they're playing the corner route. Um, if they get a vertical release by 1, then they're the high and outside help. Um, and then everybody else is playing like their feet are square, their shoulders are square, and they're bending like they're playing man coverage. And then everybody is stepping out to the outside guy. So like our strong safety, who's responsible for number 2, becomes responsible for number 1. He's got him vertical and back towards the ball. So anytime you get a swap release or an out slant or some kind of rub action, like that should negate all of that. Because you can rub all you want, but I'm stepping to the outside guy. And then in the end, I take that back. Our strong safety has number 2, our nickel has number 1. And then on the backside, our free safety has number 1, and our weak side backer has number 2. And it helped us out quite a bit this year with some stuff.
Yeah. That's what it sounds exactly like what I talked to Coach at St. X who explained it to me, and he learned it from Kirby Cannon, who's now at where's Kirby at? Kirby's at oh god, a small like a D2 Virginia school. I just can't remember what it is. It might be Wise or something. So,
yeah, because St. Ed's ran it against Moeller.
Okay. So that's So okay, just different verbiage, but yes. So all right.
It's really good.
Yeah, no, like he sold me on it hard. Like if I would have stayed at Bradford, we probably would just ran that inside and went. But like I said, it didn't seem very difficult to install at all either. And as long as you're using some match principle, again, kind of like you talked, a lot of the techniques will translate from there.
Yeah.
Like I mean, what's the word? I just lost my whole train of thought, John. Not shocked. Like I said, it's been a day. But I mean, again, red zone coverages, kind of you talked about. Like, can you explain? Because me and you've had this talk off screen, but we've not had this talk on screen. Again, you are extremely detailed human being in general, but like blitz pathing, again, a lot of people will look at it from a maybe just a pass rush perspective, but I know you look at it from a run blitzing, pass blitzing. I know you're very detailed in the paths and kind of aiming points. Kind of you want to explain how you go through that process and practice all that during the season because I think there's a lot of coaches, especially high school coaches, who don't think about, oh yeah, you're just going to blitz this gap and go, and they don't actually look at the details that necessarily you've kind of started hitting on.
Yeah, we our base philosophy on blitzing is that your aiming point is outside in on everything. So we want to kind of our path is coming from the outer half, swiping across the inner half of the gap that you're going, and you're reading the V of the neck of the guy to the inside of the gap. So if you're blitzing a gap, I'm coming outside in um, on the A gap, but I'm reading the center. And so we're going to cross face and chase ass if we get that. And the reason why we always blitz outside in is because when the ball is snapped, for some reason, those offensive guys move, and it's a lot easier to adjust your path if you're coming outside in. If I'm going vertical and they slide one way or maybe they zone that way, I'm going to get scooped by that guy, and it's harder for me to adjust. If I'm coming outside in and that gap widens, then it's easier for me to get wider and cross his face. If that gap shrinks and they're all stepping away, then it's easier for me to chase that guy's ass. But if I'm going vertical or inside out, um, if I'm going inside out, the only chance I have is if the gap is moving towards me. If not, then I'm going to get scooped, and next thing you know, we're going to have two guys in B gap and nobody in A gap. So, and then the only time we don't really put a huge emphasis on that is if we're running some kind of cross blitz inside where they can't get outside in. And then where we've changed that this year is that we want them to treat it like two defensive linemen that are running a twist. So as opposed to them doing that right off the rip, we just have them go straight. So they're both going to go, vertical on their path. And then once they get to be about a step and a half away from the offensive lineman, then they want to cross. And we treat it more like like a twist with a D lineman than we do just like two backers that are looping. And that was very good for us this year. I got an all 22 on Bass's thing, and there was an all 22 of Ohio State, and the end zone copy. I saw them doing that, and so I talked to Coach Knowles about it, and I'm like this, and it was really good, and it screwed up some guards and some centers for the guys we played against. And then also too, like our D linemen they have to help us. So if we're running interior pressures, like our inside D linemen have to step outside and help widen that gap. So where we have gotten in trouble in the past is those guys think, okay, because I'm in a 3, then I just got to go straight ahead. Like they don't understand. They still have to, step outside and widen that guard to help widen, especially like if we're running a double A gap pressure, then we're trying to put pressure on the center. And so his job to put that guy on an island is to widen the guard. And then the end then therefore has to widen a little bit. So we want to stretch them out so we can really try to zero in on the center. And then we have some other ones where we do the exact same thing, but on the guard. And that ended up being very beneficial to us because we're going to pick the worst offensive lineman and we're going to run our cross blitzes and stuff like that at that guy.
Okay. Now, my last question for you is, like you mentioned earlier, adding without making it complicated, or let me more complicated than you already are. I mean, obviously, you guys are one way. A lot of your guys have been in your system for 2, 3, 4 years before They don't even see the field some years.
Mhm.
And again, you mentioned the Dunbar kid coming over where you're probably doing a very vanilla defense, and then you get the John Puckett book of defense over here. Um, how do you add without making it more? Like, because again, the air raid coaches will say, well, if you add something, you'll take something out. That's not necessarily true with defense because you need answers, you need
Yeah.
various things, but also kind of your point, like we can't teach too many techniques because there's only so much time, and especially with a high school kid, there's only so many things they can get good at before they mentally implode. And so you can play on a high level because again, like you pointed out, those last 10 games of the season up until the Moeller game, you're allowing what 7 points a game on average or whatever it was. Like
Yeah.
playing really good defensive football in a conference that's got some really good athletes. Like Wayne had the kid to go into what Michigan or wherever he's going at receiver. Like, I mean, Springborough's got a bunch of kids. Northmont's got athletes. I mean, you can look at their record wherever you want, but Northmont has like legitimate athletes. So how
Yeah.
are you? And even Kaufman, who was down this year that you played in the playoffs, still is a really good football team.
Mm.
How are you adding and making sure you're good without adding too much or mentally overdoing the kids? Like I know you take advantage of all the time you can in season, out of season, but how are you wording it or making sure you're good so it doesn't become too much?
I think one is just because something is really good doesn't mean you have to use it, right? So it's like first thing I always ask, like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Like the time it's going to take to put into this, are we getting we getting out of it what we need? And then the to be completely honest, if it's not helping us beat Wayne, then we're not going to do it. You know what I mean? So, and if it's not going to help us versus who we have to beat in the playoffs, then it's just not worth it. Because most years, I mean, we can line up in our base stuff and be able to handle and play pretty good defense versus, uh, you know, everyone else. But is this helping us beat? How is this giving us an advantage versus Wayne? How is this giving us an advantage versus, a Moeller or whomever else, right? Like those are the things that I really like zero in on. Like, is this, um, and then what is it already similar to? Because if it's something completely new, then I don't want to do it. So how is it kind of meshing, making, say, a little tweak here in this coverage improves that this is what this gives us, right? So um, like when we did the red zone coverage or doing the Tampa stuff, like our linebackers are already running with 3 vertical. So having them do that in the Tampa stuff isn't really anything new. Uh, our corners dropping in the deep half, they already do a similar technique. So it's not really introducing anything new. It just plays out as something new. So, um, and like I said, we won't just do something to do it. Do we absolutely need it? Is how much time is it going to take for us to install it? But if the kids aren't picking it up, then I'll usually, get rid of it pretty quickly. But it's just not trying to overload them um, with, well, and in this version of cover 2, you're doing this, and in this version of cover 2, you're doing that. And we've kind of put things in the families like that. Like most of our cover 2 stuff is like a man match. We don't really, outside of the Tampa stuff, we don't really run any zone match stuff in cover 2. And it's kind of the same thing with quarters. Like we don't run like a zone match quarters really. Everything's pretty much man match. So anything that's going to require our guys to drop into a zone and vision and break, like that's not what we do. I'm shitty at coaching it. And to be honest with you, I hate it. I don't think it stops anything. There are some guys that are great at it, and that's just what they do, right? Like I suck at it, so I don't do it. It doesn't make sense to me. Um, so if it's not going to help improve on something we already do, then, but if it's like a completely different whole new technique, like I don't have our corners have to know 7 different techniques. We already play, you know, a couple different versions of cover 1, a couple different versions of 3, and a couple different versions of cover 2 and quarters. What else am I going to add? Am I going to add something completely ridiculous, like just to give them something else that may work against Springboro, but it's not, we're not going to use it versus Wayne? And to me, it's like, well, what's the point in that sense? Like, is it going to be something that's going to help us give our guys an advantage over someone that's, you know, potentially a far better athlete? Is it, or even just a better scheme? Like, then you sit there and you think about, okay, well, who do I have coming in? Who we have coming back? You know, how smart are they? Do they pick up things pretty quickly? Then who's his coach? You know, can his coach it the way it needs to be coached? Because if I'm having to coach it too, right, that's just adding more work for me to do. And then, so it kind of, I dismiss a lot of things if it doesn't kind of come into my philosophy of, you know, does this help us beat Wayne? Does this help us beat who we're going to need to Springfield, right? Like those are the 2 schools that anything we make an adjustment to, it's got to be able to help us beat those 2 schools. If it doesn't, then I'm not going to mess with it.
I get you. So, coaches, obviously, you can check out the many podcasts and clinics that me and John have done. It's John's Ripley's stuff still gets numerous views every day. Like I think I mean I was looking at it the other day. It's like it's one of the top 5 videos still, John. Like that's the funny thing. Like we filmed that like 4 years ago at this point, 3.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Like
I did a Zoom last week with some guys from Utah over it.
Like what? I'm curious because it takes 5 seconds to pull it up. Let's see. And those interviews, kick and cover, news, popular videos. 22,000 views for the original Ripley's match video.
That's crazy.
Yeah, like I mean, it is. I mean, yeah, third most popular video on my channel. So you're behind Runda and you're behind Lino.
Runda's 3 high stuff.
Yep.
That's a pretty good video, though.
Yes. No, he did a really good job. And
yeah.
Lino, it's Massillon, Washington. So.
Oh, okay. Is that it, like run fits or something?
Yeah, his linebacker reads and run fits. So, yeah, they played a game at our place, the playoff game at our place this year. So they just abused. I don't even remember who they played. Like they were up 14-0 without ever getting on offense. So punt return touchdown, punt return the same kid touchdown, and then so they're up, forced fumble up 21-0. Whoever it was Taze Valley. Taze Valley scores, and then they kick off to the kid that had already turned 2 punts, and he turned the kick return for a touchdown. He had 61 offers. You would think not to kick to him, but that's a whole different discussion.
I heard that. Good
like,
Lord.
Or after the first one he returned, just stop kicking to the kid.
Right.
Just that.
Yeah, I'm sure that wasn't his first one all year.
No, he had a really good night, and I left that because I was cold. So, again, follow John on Twitter. Reach out to John if you need to talk to anything. John will talk ball with you all day long. And check out his other videos, the podcast, all that jazz. Like, share, subscribe. Check out the sponsor Coachpad. That's our episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.